So I wanted to go through some concepts. We work with a range of events from big sporting events like the New York Marathon to everyone from those folks to the Assistance League East Side, which is working with the homeless conditions in Seattle East Bay, to wine festivals, to fairs who are not traditionally the most tech savvy folk. So we work with a very broad range of people that have produced virtual events in 2020, as well as the traditional core customers of people who are really live event specialists. And I wanted to talk about specifically, first off, just to get the conversation started, is like, what is the goal of a virtual film festival, right? Why do it at all, essentially? The goal would be, at least from my perspective, to provide Sanofi with an inspiring, fun, and intuitive way to watch your films and engage with filmmakers, to provide meaningful sponsor engagement with attendees and filmmakers that justify you charging them sponsorships. And then ultimately, the idea is to cultivate and grow your online community. There's great opportunities with some of the tools that have come out for really doing that in a great way. And to build excitement towards the next live event that you have, or supplemental version of that if it's going to be hybrid for the foreseeable future for the next year or two. Who knows at this rate, right? And it'll all depend on the data. So why go virtual in general on top of that is because people miss live events. Now, when I say live, I think it's safe to frame it nowadays as just meaning a live, instant, happening right now thing to do, whether it's online or physically in person somewhere. I do think that in terms of going virtual, people are so much more comfortable online and Zoom. You'll notice everyone was able to join the Zoom meeting. 11 months ago, you still had people going, what's Zoom? And now it's just like, I actually put a face mask on the other day for the first time ever for a Zoom meeting, because it's just become so much a natural part of my meeting life. So people are very used to online. Sponsors are desperate for ways to reach people. Sponsors whose previous had entire marketing divisions spun up for live events needed to find a way to shift that. And the answer wasn't just to go PPC spend on Facebook and things like that, because there's so much noise from every other consumer brand out there that they wanted to use their specialization and still be able to reach your specific audience. Why film festivals in particular as an attractive thing for sponsors? Because A, all of your attendees, and then B, the thought leaders that are your filmmakers that are participating, right? The actors, the directors, they're going to be future influencers if they're indie level. A lot of the people that are exposed to your film festival are already influencer tier folks and celebrity folks. So being able to have access and get impressions on those folks is really powerful for sponsors. And on top of the regular live public event attendee draw that you'd have in normal sponsorships. And finally, I personally don't believe virtual is here to stay. And if anyone spent 40 hours on Zoom meetings in a week and got into the weekend and said, I just don't want to really go online for another 4 hours this weekend, you know what I mean? I think that live events will always be really impactful and have beautiful experiences for us as people. I do think that hybrid components might be here to stay, meaning that if you go to a live event, there's really cool ways to incorporate digital, to do follow-ups, to bring things back, and to keep your community warm throughout the year through the digital experience. That's a much more scalable and economic way than it is to only plan around one live event weekend or day a year. So with all that, and hopefully, so first of all, anyone disagree? Anyone have anything they'd like to add to any of those? Am I hitting it on the head? Am I missing some key aspects as to what's important to you about virtual? So far, so good? All right, I'll keep going. Definitely feel free to interrupt, jump in with questions. I'm not meant to be an angry speaker or anything like that. I try to be egoless. So please, this is very much, I would love your feedback too. We're always learning as we go, and I learn something new every day. As I look at key concepts to virtual festivals, folks that have done it the most successful, they think about certain things. Number one is, one of the decisions you have to make very early on is what to do live versus what to do pre-recorded. Obviously, films are all considered a type of pre-recorded because they're all videos essentially. But within a festival, are you going to pre-record your MC announcements? Are you going to pre-record panels? Or are you going to do them live? If you do them live, what engagement aspects do you want for your attendees? Is it going to be Q&A? Is it going to be coming on live and unmuting them to ask a question? Thinking about that early on is really going to determine everything from your budget and the equipment that you're going to be needing down to your scheduling. In terms of that, once you have people on your virtual festival and you're looking at engagement, think about your CTAs, right? Meaning, what do you want people to do? when they go to your virtual venue, what are they going to see? What are they going to want to click on? What do you want to encourage them to click on and to do as far as discovering your virtual festival? In terms of your sponsors, how are they finding and engaging with different sponsors? Is it just an advertisement that's spamming them, or is it a meaningful engagement? Is it something that brings value in terms of education or inspiration or entertainment to them from your sponsorships? Something that I've been told, at least, is that the film industry has a great opportunity to really harness the power of integrated sponsors that add value to an event versus your traditional just logo placements. And I'm happy to chat about that more. That's going to be very heavily talked about tomorrow, but something we'd love to dive into today too if there's interest. Finally, how do you measure? How do you know if you have a great virtual event? Is it just impressions? Maybe. Is it the time someone actually spends on the event? So we'll look at all that a little bit. Are there any other key components that someone would want to break out in addition to these components as I've listed them? How about ticket revenue? I'd say ticketing, attendee marketing for virtual versus hybrid. Anyone else? All right.
Membership throughout the year.
We're looking at, go ahead.
Sorry. Membership throughout the year, how to engage them.
Yes. Yep. And is that a paid membership, or is it a free membership and then paid for premium access, right? Is it a multi-tiered subscription? So there's a lot of that sprung up, especially for building those audiences year round. And how are you weaving those into your pivotal anchor virtual event or hybrid event, right? To encourage those and they play off and complement each other throughout the year. So as I think about when I'm producing a festival, there's a couple advantages and disadvantages to doing live. Live allows you to be spontaneous. It allows you to have real-time reactions and excitement. The biggest thing for me to do live is I tell people to do as much live as you can. It's so much more forgiving. If you watch a pre-recorded thing, you just expect the cinema quality experience. And when you have speakers that are not professional interviewers doing pre-recorded, a lot of times they're so worried about misspeaking that they come off with their energy flat. When you're live, they have that energy and excitement and a little bit of nervousness that comes off in a very compelling and real human way. And it just adds to the overall excitement. In my experience, when you can do it live, it's always better live. The other thing is it creates this urgency, right? If people can only get to it during this one scheduled period, especially if you're doing anything with two-way engagement where it's a panel, you can ask your question of your filmmaker or your star or something like that only during that live panel. You won't get the chance watching it on replay. So there's a great amount of live that I think people often too quickly say, I'll just pre-record everything so that it's easy. But then what happens is you have to really carefully direct your energy levels for those productions. You may have to make speakers redo it if they come off flat. So there's pluses and minuses to both. Obviously with pre-recording, you get the highest production value. You can do movie magic and post, as they call it. And you get to do do-overs. If someone messes up, they can do a few takes. You can splice things together. It's not all one shot, one take. I'm going to pivot really quickly into, well, actually, let's stop there a second. So in terms of this, what are you planning now in terms of live and recorded? Has this been something that you've had to debate internally, or what are your thoughts around it? I'll just throw that out to the crowd.
In the past, we've done a live award show, and this year we pre-recorded it, but we did show it live at the drive-in. Okay. So
versus on demand.
Pardon?
You did it live at the drive-in versus on demand, in other words?
We pre-recorded the award show, and then we showed it at the drive-in.
Yep. It still created this exciting event for people to clap and cheer and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What was the overall?
Real well, sorry. It worked out well in the aspect that the production quality was higher, but it wasn't, obviously it was pre-recorded, so.
Yeah. Christina, I saw you jump off camera. Do you want to add to that? Oh, you're still on mute.
Fancy that. Hey, hey everybody. We at the 48, we have different events in different cities around the world. And so we had to do a combination of things throughout the year. And but here in DC, I ran the DC one, and we did an awards thing where I did it live. but there wasn't very much feedback, and it was a lot shorter than it was. So that's why I'm here today, because I could definitely use a few pump ups on the ladder of making it a good event.
Fair enough. I'm an American University alma mater, so actually
cool.
Charlie Wachtel was a frat bro of mine, if you can believe that.
Funny.
So very familiar with the DC film circuit. Our school was much heavier into documentaries, still is, I think, but it's a great market for it, and there's also a pretty tech savvy audience there. So I think there's some definite opportunities.
Yes.
How about someone else? Is that Ben? Is that Oregon?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I actually work at the Autry Museum in LA, and we don't have a film festival so much as many events throughout the year and a few festivals of other forms. One of the things we've discovered recently with live versus pre-recorded is that particular Zoom fatigue has kicked in. A lot less people are coming to live. So therefore, all of the two-way engagement aspect is sort of not balanced out by the amount of work it takes to put on a live event versus a pre-recorded. And also the timing is much more challenging. You know, before early days, you could put an event on at whatever time made sense for the event. But now people aren't necessarily wanting to watch something at 7 o'clock after they've had a full day on Zoom. Whereas if it's pre-recorded, or even in our case, a lot of events are live, recorded, and then posted later, we are getting significantly more viewing later. Significantly, sort of as many over a couple of weeks, we're getting 10 times the amount of attendance that we got in live.
Okay.
So there's definitely arguments there, but I do really find that the lack of audience Q&A is lacking. It is lacking for the pre-recorded, the purely pre-recorded. So.
And my hypothesis would be that I'd be interested to see if the total time spent doing it pre-recorded was less than at a live show, because at a live show, you're compelled to stay there for more and catch more programming. And an on-demand format, I guess I'll bring this home in an easy way. If you've ever attended a virtual B2B conference and they said all sessions will be available for replay, how many of you went back and watched every session on replay afterwards, right? That you could get in. How many of you watched just one, maybe skimmed through two of them? So that's why, as my theory is that you're right. It's so important to develop compelling programming for but at the same time, where you have to manage the on-demand, because everyone's doing Zoom homeschooling now as well in many markets, right? How do you balance that out with driving people in and getting that intense level of engagement rather than a casual skimming? Because people will pay for tickets a lot more if it's that intense level of engagement and desire versus just skimming replays and things like that. If it's on demand and you're not really into a film, you're not in the theater and watching it for 2 hours, you're just turning it off too. So that's something else to consider. Really good input. Thanks, Ben. Any other folks like to chime in on that angle? How have you seen in terms of your engagement for those that did something virtual in 2020 for your live programming versus or do you have any advice actually for how to get better metrics, or did you feel like your live event was really successful? The driving concept's one way that's been great, and then it's kind of a hybrid that seems to be working really well. They just started getting approval for some of that stuff in LA too, but that's been something a lot of people, and it's cool because you have that essentially audience captured at that point for the duration that they're there for the event, which is helpful. I'm going to jump over into some other sponsorship concepts. Talking about virtual partnerships. And this is something where, just as a point of, again, I'm a cinephile, I'm a huge film geek through and through. If you get what my shirt means, then I hopefully that gives me some street cred. If not, I recommend you check out Pitch Meeting on YouTube. But in terms of selling sponsorships, it's always really confused me as to why, just in general as an industry, film festivals seem to lag behind any other consumer event when it comes to this. And it really blows my mind because film festivals have so much more influencer and celebrity presence at their events than your average health expo or running expo or something like that. So I think this is just with virtual, the biggest thing I can say is that with a film festival, you have so much little real estate. At a live event, you have maybe 2, maybe 6, unless you're a massive festival that has a whole sponsor village on site, you're usually working out of a theater, lounge, or a few, and there's not that much space, right? Virtual and hybrid opens the door to just blow that wide off. You can do a full virtual sponsor villages like any other music fest or sporting event. So if I had to just say, dear film industry, here's my love letter to you, do virtual sponsor villages, I think that's what it would be. And I want to take a minute and just unpack a little bit of what how you would go about laying that out and constructing it. By the way, if you want some ideas specific to laying out booths and things like that, we do have an example. Ainsley, if you could drop it into chat. We have a mock-up virtual film fest to show you how you might go about crafting a virtual sponsor village. But the idea is, when you get these people in, whether it's on demand or whether it's a live scheduled virtual event, give them something else to do in between the programming to break it up, right? And to give yourself, if you're doing a live broadcast, give yourself time for resetting and things like that. Give your talent time for offline. But the way to do that is to really drive folks to sponsors where they can actually not just see an ad, but discover, play with virtually the products, interact with actual human beings from those companies, because people are just dying for someone other than their kid or their spouse, although we love those folks, to talk to on a given day, right? Give them some way to interact with human beings live and to really feel like they're getting to learn and know a brand. And you can do that with virtual, super cheap, super easy, with minimal setup and production, especially if the platform, which most of them do, allows the sponsor to set up their own module or booth, if you will. In terms of beyond a virtual booth or sponsor activation, some of the opportunities, and I've picked the brains of a couple of different film fest consultants before this as well, is that they said overall as an industry, there's a huge opportunity where other industries like sporting events, for example, integrate sponsorship so much more seamlessly into the programming, so it doesn't feel like advertising. They're actually bringing something and contributing something to the program. Maybe they're bringing a sponsored athlete in, right? So why not partner with Nikon or something to bring one of the directors in, things like that, and then really weaving that into the fabric so that enhances, and it also takes some of the pressure off of you from a production value standpoint when you can share in the programming with some key sponsors. How many folks are doing that already or have started planning that for this year? Quick show of virtual hands, if you will. How many people say I'm way off base, that'll never work, my audience won't like it? So a fair opportunity to explore. Cool. And this could be things as intensely woven into your fabric as during your live stream, there's maybe a commercial that's not a true commercial, but it's a spotlight 30-second or 2-minute interview with a filmmaker sponsored by a brand, or it's a giveaway, it's a contest, win a camera package, win a Final Draft Pro license for a year or something like that with an hour of consultation with a writer. Something like that could be really cool. So there's ways to do sponsorships that make it feel like it's really adding value and making the event exciting and adding a surprise and delight factor, if you will, which is a concept I'll jump into here shortly. With sponsors, the key is not just impressions, although they love impression numbers. And virtually across the board, we've seen a lot higher impression counts than live events when it comes to different sponsor logos and placement. But what's really key is being able to give them what we call those CTAs, calls to action, that develop into qualified leads for those sponsors. And doing that and weaving them into your programming is really the way to drive interest. And it's also a way to keep people on your event longer and not feeling like they get more value for it. When you think about it, if you've ever been to a music festival, you go for the show, but you stay for all the craft vendors and the food and the whole entire experience of being there. And when you're at a film festival, you go for the movies. But a lot of times I feel like there's the one problem is that real estate thing where you can only have them doing so much outside of going from screening to screening. And with virtual, you do have this opportunity to have this full value to make an entire day thing or a multi-session thing beyond just the films to really get into the culture and the community that you're trying to build. In terms of how you're going to package and price sponsorships. Going to touch on that just briefly again. Tomorrow's session is really focused on everything about sponsorship for live, hybrid, and virtual, and what we can learn from other folks that are doing it very well. But that surprise and delight thing is one thing I mentioned. Just because your festival's virtual doesn't mean all of your sponsorships have to be, right? I actually just yesterday, there's a group called Ideas on, and they did a festival virtually called Retrospect. I just got a surprise and delight box from them with a bunch of goodies. So you can have your sponsors drop ship you their product. You can pay them to assemble and then ship out, and they pay you to assemble and then pay you shipping to ship out your product. And you can give maybe all of your filmmakers get a special surprise and delight box, or a VIP tier gets a surprise and delight box from you with your branding. You put some festival swag in there for them to take selfies with them, post on social media. And at the same time, they're getting sampling, getting coupons, and becoming brand ambassadors for your sponsors. That's some of the stuff you can do with a virtual event that's still giving people that tangible hands-on experience. So how to sell virtual sponsorships. Again, very briefly, I want to because I want to give us a lot of time for discussion. How am I doing on time, Ainsley, by the way?
We're at 4:30.
Great.
Right now.
I do like to give people time back for those relief breaks. So I'll plan to wrap this probably at 10 minutes until, although by no means will I cut it short on my behalf. So, all right. So virtual sponsorships and booths, some things that you can do other than learning how to spell sponsorships better, if you're me, are positioning. You can sell different tiers of sponsorships. So is someone premium logo on the header of your entire venue, or are they down the page, someone has to scroll, or are they featured right below the main screen or the main stage? And you can charge different amounts for those. Are you going to upsell them with, hey, you know, if you want to do a dedicated social media blast, it's only another $300. Oh, great, throw it in. Things like that cost you almost nothing other than a few seconds to program and upload a logo, but can get you a few hundred, you know, and it all adds up. So one of the things I like to talk about when I'm talking with consumer events is, yeah, you're going to go after your main title sponsors with the bulk of your energy. But if you design your systems, whether it's just a sponsorship kit with a simple application, or using a more heavy platform like ours that allow you to scale smaller sponsorships, how much more money is on the table if you make those lower tier sub $20,000 sponsorships, we'll say, or sub 10,000 more attainable from a scalability and manageability standpoint? How much more money could you bring in? In terms of pricing, don't give it away. So many people made the mistake in 2020 of saying, I'm just going to give it to all my sponsors and I'm going to give them a refund or credit them towards 2021 and just give it to them. Here's the thing. They're still getting impressions. They're still getting value. It costs them so much less because if they were doing something in person, they're not paying for an entire team to come in and travel. They're not paying for flights and hotel accommodations. They're not paying for this massive $10,000 setup that they're producing and then shipping and then setting up logistically on site, and for all the staff there, right? Much less incremental time for them to set up. They're using a graphics team, hopefully, and they're building some things to spec from a multimedia standpoint. And then their people just jump on if you're doing live sponsor village windows just for those few hours, and that's it. Very minimal time. So you can charge for that because guess what? Their budgets maybe half the cost, but this only cost half of what they normally have. But this only costs them 25% of what a full on-site might cost. So there's still an opportunity to ask. That's the other thing I can't emphasize enough. Too many people give it away, or it's like, oh, $50, great. And it's just something that they had 1,000 and you asked for $50, so they gave you $50. And my background in between running Event Hub and working at Lionsgate was actually running these sponsor activations. And I can't tell you how many times I would call a festival and think they were going to pitch me like $3 to $5 grand, which was my budget. And then they're like, oh, do you think you could swing $600? And it was like, yes, I'll make that happen somehow. Thank you so much. So those are the opportunities that, you know, you don't want to underprice yourself. You really want to price yourself, not just against other film festivals, but what other consumer events with the same type of stature in the similar markets and potentially similar attendees are looking at. And then give yourself a bump for that celebrity and influencer presence that you bring to the table. So those are some of my general concepts to run through. I am very excited to take this in multiple directions. Hopefully some folks have some ideas they want to talk about. Where would you like to take it from here? Who'd like to go first?
Could I ask this Marianne a question? Could you possibly go back to the slide you just showed? That was really, really good.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you could take us back there would be really great.
This one?
Yes, really good.
Sure. Whoop. I'm trying to make it bigger. Is that bigger?
That's great.
I'm happy to share this with everyone too. I can actually upload this after I fix the spelling on that one sponsorships that's going to bother my OCD brain to our mock film festival, and you'll be able to download it right from the main hall. We'll just drop a downloadable Google Drive file. This is actually, I used the base of another, I've presented this to the International Association of Fairs and Expos. I've presented this similar talk to Washington Festivals and Events, and it's all a lot of the core concept that everyone's struggling with. It's not just the film industry, but I do feel like there's the most potential for exponential growth for sponsorships with the film festival industry, and also the most exponential growth for just creating this community, because a lot of times film fests get a bit of a narrow audience rap. And I think that people are actually yearning more than ever for indie content and really special content that they wouldn't discover on their own. And film festivals bring that in a powerful way to the community. And now with these virtual platforms, there's no cap. You don't have, if you only have 100 or 200 person theater and you can only play one at a time, guess what? You can have concurrent viewings, multiple viewings for very fractional costs as what it would cost for a live show. So there is some really great opportunities here. But I'll upload this for sure. Thanks for the feedback on that. I was very grateful for that. These are the types of perks, by the way, you would build into a deck when you're pricing things out, a sponsorship deck. So you typically have like perk packages, you'll list your email size. Our platform, and Jake could probably share an example, or Ainsley to actually, do you have the virtual fest page built out with some demographics? If we have that, we'll share one. So you can see, so people will typically list attendee demographics, and you don't have to have audited through a major accounting firm, you know, your attendee demographics. It's your best guess. It's your general gut feeling. You know your audience well enough to say, ballpark, I can say this. No one's going to come after you for an audit on that, especially these lower tier sponsors. They just want to get an idea of who your audience is. And if you have pics of some crowds exiting theaters or in the lobby of previous years, you can throw those in to prove it. And that's good enough for me as a sponsor. It's like, okay, great. I see that they're not totally making stuff up. Close enough. You're just trying to get in the range of people, because everything is really just a general idea when it comes to the sponsor targeting within those like demographics, whether it's income or gender or whatever you're doing. It's not hard to come up with those, and just having them in there makes it look like you've thought through your audience, and sponsors will be attracted to that, as well as can't emphasize enough multimedia. It's amazing that as festivals, especially film festivals, some of the multimedia opportunities there are to improve multimedia assets to show off how great your festival is. So all of that can go into forming a deck, whether it's online and built in, or whether it's a PDF, something to think about. One thing I love to ask is, go ahead.
I was gonna, sorry. Can we tap back into the virtual booths? So this is something that my team and I have been talking about a little bit, because I've been seeing it more and more. And I've seen some examples, but when you're doing the virtual booths, what are they sitting, waiting for people to come? What type of information is normally needed for them? I've seen some where they have it set up where there's like flyers and clickable and downloadable things, or some where people, they just maybe have a pre-recorded video or something like that. Are there any that are also live within, or should they all be kind of pre-recorded?
No, I think that's great. So one thing that's really unique about our platform in particular is, let's see, Jake, do you happen to want to screen share? We actually recommend doing this. I don't say do 10 hours a day of live. I say do 1 hour a day, maybe 2 tops of live sponsor village booths. And that's where people can actually be on running live prizes with people who come in. They can be talking to people, especially if it's something where you have camera equipment and things like that. You want expert knowledge from the people who make it for that. That's something that you can get really powerful attendee engagement from. So if I'm able to jump on as the sponsor and field up to 50, 100 people coming in and out over the course of an hour that are talking and want to know about my cameras, what lens to pair with it, things like that. That's some really powerful stuff. And that's going to lead to some really qualified customers for them. So the way we lay it out, at least, is that there's a top area that's kind of a main stage or for your main premieres, or for your live streaming MC announcements and talking about the programming. And if you scroll down the page,
we're inside of a booth, by the way.
Oh, we're inside of a booth. Perfect. So this is a booth, the way we lay it out. Gives you the ability to actually list individual items for purchase. For people that actually are a little more tech savvy and we use something called Shopify, there's an API. You can actually have purchasable items right in the booth. This would be perfect for your camera sponsors. This would be perfect for any of your film gear sponsors that can just literally drop a code in from Shopify and it'll pull through all this purchasable inventory so that people can be buying their camera packages and things like that right in the booth, or their green screen setups or podcast mics or whatever have you, right? Those little horseshoe LED kits and things like that. Great options for sponsors, great things that work very well for point of purchase. Additionally, you can use booths to convert. So if car dealerships are a huge sponsor for Film Fest, right? Well, what if you can talk to a specialist and then they can convert you to come in for a test drive because it's all reservation only right now. And there's a link right in the booth to schedule that test drive at your local dealership. And there's a few dealers in the area because that's where your audience pulls from. So you can do some really cool things with that. And then with our platform, you can have announcements that pop up that will direct people specifically to a sponsor booth at a time, either on demand, instant, or you can schedule them throughout your day and programming to drive people to different booths for programming and contests and things like that to really just bring people's eyes on it. So that's the way we've laid it out. I think there's some similarities with some of the other virtual platforms on there. And just in case you wonder, I know that I was told the biggest concern about virtual platforms for film festivals is the digital rights management piece. And that's something that we've taken into consideration. And that's totally built in on a device access level and both from that and then a restricted downloading and viewing content angle. Happy to dive more into that in one-on-ones as well. Did that answer your question in terms of how to kind of lay out booths? And we can do a deep dive on that as well. Tomorrow's session, I'm going to really get into fine tuning, okay, how to lay out the booths, how to separate premium from regular booths and price them accordingly and add different perk packages and e-blasts and things like that into them as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to be a part of that conversation. But yes, you did help answer at least the base of everything. And I know I can come back tomorrow and get some more information. But I was taking some notes, but that definitely helps out a lot, especially because you already have the platform. Things are set out. They're functionable. I know we have a different range in audience, but we do have a lot of older audience as well. So we'd like it to be as clean and cut for them as possible.
Yes. And on that note, I will say two things. One is that for nonprofits, our festival platform is as low as $1,500 all in. And then we have ticketing partners that plug into that are super cheap in terms of ticketing fees. We partner with a company called Ticketspice that actually works with a lot of film fests already, I believe. And then in terms of the usability, we work with county fairs that have grandmas shouting out for their kids' goat showing virtually. So if they could figure it out, then hopefully the older film audiences can figure it out too. I like to say if you can message your grandkid on Facebook, then you can use my platform. Or if you're like my mom and she writes like after she presses like, then you know it works for that too. Other feedback in terms of how you're approaching sponsorships differently for virtual and hybrid than you did previous years. I'd love to just hear ideas and thoughts. And we don't have to keep it on. We can talk about programming. One of the things has anyone else experienced kind of that recorded issue where you think you have a great speaker and then you get a recording from them and you're like, where's the energy when I saw you live? Things like that. How are you overcoming that? How are you directing them on a Zoom while they do it or giving them a live audience while they record? What are some ways that you've overcome that?
I know for ours, since I'm unmuted, I'll tap in. I know for ours, we do a practice beforehand with them. And then of course, there are things that are going to happen the day of that sometimes you can't control, but we always have a staff member or a special guest or someone there with them to help navigate in case that happens. We had someone from Israel chiming in, but their connection was really bad. So we ended up having to have the special guest just kind of tap into another part of it because we couldn't get him back and then do a recorded version that we could post later for everyone to see. So things like that really do help. We try to get them to have the headphones. Starting with the headphones, we know that's another audio problem. If you don't have the headphones when you first start and then you try to plug them in, now all your audio's gone. Little things like that that we've like practiced beforehand for our Fall Fest and everything.
Yes, I can't tell you how much like people just assume everyone knows. So both things happen, right? One, everyone knows how to use Zoom now. Two, no one knows how to use Zoom now still, right? And they'll always forget the most important thing exactly when it's time to be in front of your audience. So you got to require dress rehearsals, and don't just require them for your key people, require them for anyone that's touching your event that's attendee facing for sure. Because you know what they'll do? They'll surprise you. And then the day of the event, they'll come with a new device that they haven't tested before, or they'll forget that they had a mic set up to some other Bluetooth device or something, and they won't be able to get, and it'll just be this disjointed thing. Even though you've done everything perfectly, they'll make it look like you didn't have your stuff together. So required dress rehearsals the week of the event as well, not a month before, so they forget. And do that with your sponsors if you're doing live too, because those sponsors, if they feel like they weren't taken care of in handheld leading up to it, will be the first to blame you if anything goes wrong and they can't get their computer hooked up or something like that. So definitely worth dress rehearsals. Can't emphasize enough. Even if you're mixing a lot of recorded programming in, going through those dress rehearsals with your team to make sure everything flows. And you know what gets people a lot of times is the internet bandwidth. Make people plug into an Ethernet cable. If they have the new MacBook and only have a USB-C, make them get an adapter or send it to them and build that into your budget. Things like that are just huge. And for $40, you can get a 1080p web stream cam. So easy nowadays. And you know, you can get podcast mics. This one was, I think, 70, 80 bucks. And it's not bad. And just doing that, you know, if you have a keynote speaker offered, and what's cool is that you can actually use these year over year, right? If you get a kit, you can cycle it to different people if you're doing pre-recording, so you know they're recording on good equipment, or if they're doing a live show, you can get it back after the show if you're going high end. If you're going low end for $100, you can send someone an entire kit to spec that you want them to use to make sure you know you get at least a minimum quality. It's worth thinking through things like that and building that into the budget, because incrementally, if they mess up a presentation, they destroy what, $5, $10, $20,000 of value potentially for future years and audience excitement and things like that. So thinking about it in that way in terms of production will make sure you have a great experience. I have 3 minutes left to when I said I would let folks go. Any other major questions or challenges, thoughts on your mind?
How about audience interaction? What are folks doing? I mean, are they?
Yes.
You want to jump in on that? Other people?
Yeah. What have other folks done for audience engagement? Where have you seen, let me rephrase that. Where have you seen the most audience engagement thus far?
So where I've seen it happen is in sort of separate events from the films themselves. So if they do sort of the trivia events or that kind of thing, then there's also then the engagement through the Q&As afterwards. But mostly that's so far as I know, their two choices are people typing in their questions, which is not as interactive, or you can do Zoom, and depending on how many people you have, then you have a whole boatload of images in front of you and it's a little confusing. So there's.
And for that particular use case, if you wanted to let people come on and off, honestly, probably Zoom webinar is the easiest way to do it. People can raise their hands. You can elevate, you can say, type in your questions and raise your hand. And if we like your question, we'll call on you. And then you can unmute one person at a time so that you don't have that jumble of videos. Here, I actually chose Zoom meeting with an expanded account because I wanted to be able to see everyone and meet everybody like I would in a large room when I'm talking to people in an audience. But if it was a panel, I would actually have it so that just me and my panelists were on, and then I would elevate people and then demote people again after. And that also ensures that everyone here is clearly good at Zoom, because no one's had kids screaming in the background and left mute on or anything like that. This is so weird for me to not have that happen. I can't tell you how much.
I had mine go watch play video games. So there you go.
Yeah, but I didn't hear it. So usually there's like kids screaming. There's like, hey, did you pick up the bread or something like that in the background? None of that's happened today. So y'all are pros, but don't count on your attendees being pros. So thinking about how you're giving them chances to engage like that is really cool. The other thing I've seen spring up recently is doing like these one-on-one meet and greets that are just rapid fire queuing people up. And there's these recorded meet and greets with stars and things like that you can potentially offer for certain VIP tiers too. So there's a lot of different ways to engage other people. What have been the most engaging elements as far as your virtual from 2020 that you can share? Don't be shy. No one's judging.
We have, I mean, ours is still similar to Christina's with the Q&As mostly, but we also have some surveys like at the end of the films for them to vote, because we do like awards for ours.
Yep.
So that was a small way for them to engage, and they could, you know, choose what they want and maybe leave a little comment and something like that. And that was helpful. And of course, we're sending daily emails during our festival that breaks down, like, because we're using a new platform. So we're using Citizen. In our platform, you know, with geo-blocking and things like that, certain things are only up for a certain amount of time. So every day we're sending an e-blast out in the morning that sets out, okay, this is the new movie for today. Here's the movies that are leaving. Here's the time they're leaving. So they can kind of be up with those things. And another thing, if you guys can try to get an IT sponsor, I know that helped us out a lot in our Fall Fest, and we're probably going to use it again for our Spring Fest. But just for people who have extra questions, sometimes it's like a cord or a different type of monitor that we really can't answer. But those IT guys can tap in and say, okay, move it to the right, pull it out of the left, stick it there, if that works, and then they're good to go. So that was helpful for us also.
In terms of actually running the production side of it on the back end. Yeah, like an AV company, tech company for that. That's true.
Yes.
Yep. When we're brought on or asked to do production services on top of the platform, we'll come in and do a Zoom frame coaching. Okay, is this going, what mic are you on, what audio, what video, all that kind of stuff. What's your, do an internet speed test, send us the report. Make sure you actually have the speed to run what you're going to be doing if you're going to be screen sharing. All that's really important. You had said something really important about email blast. That the biggest failure I've seen from attendee engagement is events not sending a ton of emails out to communicate with their attendees. Multiple every day, multiple in the days. Like, you cannot tell people enough about the programming for your event. After it starts, they will immediately forget everything after your first session. So hit them again with it. You have to. So many events out there say, oh, once they get into our event for the first time, they'll remember to come back and remember this. So you have to have those anchors and the abilities to add things to schedules. I love platforms that have, okay, add this to my actual phone calendar, not some app I have to log into to see the schedule, by the way. So then it's actually pinging me about it, but you got to hit them with emails throughout, way ahead a lot, the day before a lot, during, as much as you can with different aspects, because it's going to really, really drive attendee engagement better than anything else, I would say. So, and I'm just harping on that because I can't tell you how many people missed that and did everything right, had the most amazing experiences. They had one email kickoff the day of in the morning, and that was it. And it's just like, you saw the second day fell through the floor in terms of engagement and things like that. Great point. So with that, what topics should we focus on tomorrow? Are you most interested in digging into the virtual booths deeper as a concept and how to build those and sell those? Is that fair? And then in terms of what other aspects would you like to put into the conversation topics tomorrow?
How you tie your ticketing into like we use another platform for ticketing besides.
Oh, yeah. I haven't even sold my own platform very much, huh? Yes. So Event Hub sponsorship. Jake's like, what are you doing? Yes. So Event Hub is a sponsorship platform. We have this virtual expo that sits on top of it. We're ticketing agnostic, meaning that you can import registrations from any other ticketing company and have access control by attendees. You can also export unique access links by attendee from our platform, and you can limit those by device as far as how many devices are able to access and the total number of times someone's able to join the event, which is really great for protecting your content and the exclusivity of the event. We happen to have an API with Ticketspice, RegFox, and then that allows also for on-demand registration. But you can also set it up to use your own ticketing platform and then still have a pop-up on-demand registration through Ticketspice the day of. We're super not exclusive in terms of that at all, very flexible. And then everyone that actually works with Event Hub, you don't just get the virtual piece, you get access to sponsorship marketplace. There's more than 21,000 sponsor users. all different consumer brands. There's a lot of health and wellness. There's a lot of equipment and tech. And those sponsors are all looking for different opportunities. We're already having, like, getting pinged yesterday about Kansas City Marathon in October. So it's like a lot of sponsors are looking for stuff as soon as in the next 2 weeks, and some of them are planning their years way out. And the key is, if you're exposed to them and you're discoverable, just like your sponsors, you want them to be discoverable within your festival. If your festival's discoverable for this large audience of sponsors, you're going to see some inbound interest. And it gives you this whole built-in tool to be able to make this really nice showcase page. Jake, did you drop that in, I think, right? As far as the...
Yeah,
this
so
is-
we'll also have this on our, it'll be on our virtual page, but we'll have the virtual film festivals. So you guys can take a look at what it actually looked like. And then also links to our
Yep.
marketplace. All that other stuff will be posted on our page.
So this is just an example sponsorship listing page. And this is all included for that $15.30 price, which is what we do for nonprofits. Otherwise, the retail list price is $1,800. If you're a larger fest and you have some bigger budgets, you want to do some custom work, like New York Marathon, for example. Where is it? It didn't work. What's that?
TCS NYC.
That's right. I switched to a new computer, so there it is. You can do vanity URLs or white label URLs, and you can totally customize CSS depending. We're still at max price, half the price of a lot of these other platforms like the C-Events of the world out there, from what I've been told. And that's because we're not just virtual. It's okay, virtual, and also a way for you to build the sponsorship community. And this really, the goal with us is we want to build a platform that lets you find the right sponsors for your event that are the right fit for your audience, and it lets them find the right events that really match up well with what they're trying to do versus just, random stuff or whoever you can get. That's what we're trying to do here. So this is New York's page, as an example of the virtual piece. Happy to dive into that more tomorrow. On the management side of things, we, Jake, do you have a dashboard you can pull up for that real quick?
I do, actually, believe it or not.
I believe it. So Jake's showing you right now. This is our we give you this entire scalable, streamlined dashboard to manage any application or message of interest about sponsorships, whether it's a pre-built package or whether you're sending out custom RFPs, if you will. Sponsor lingo term for anyone who's a sponsorship person. There's a custom RFP for a sponsorship. It just means a request for proposal. You tell them, hey, we can give you this for this much, and then you go back and forth and negotiate. So this platform handles applications through those listing pages on the marketplace, all of your payments through a Stripe integration, or if you're doing checks, you can mark it off. If you have cannabis sponsors and they're dropping off a bag of cash, that happens a lot in California, and I'm not making a joke, that happens a surprising amount. You can mark that off too as a manual payment. Legally, only, CBD we're talking about here, folks, of course. So, and it does everything like that. And it seamlessly links into that virtual expo. All of your sponsors get their own free accounts to build out their own virtual booths, upload their paperwork, get all of their loading information if it's hybrid or whatever. So that's the gist of it. We'll look at that again tomorrow. And please reach out to myself, Jacob, or Ainsley. We're in the Slack channel as well. Jacob and I are. We'd love to do one-on-ones and give you a private demo if we're going to look at this. We'd love to just talk about sponsorship practices, virtual event practice in general. We're huge geeks about it. So thanks very much for your time today.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.